Picture this. A man stands over a massive canvas spread on the floor. In his hand, not a brush, but a can of paint. With a flick of his wrist, he sends ribbons of colour flying through the air. They land in swirling, chaotic patterns. To some, it looks like a mess. To others, it's a masterpiece. This man is Jackson Pollock, and he's about to turn the art world on its head. Born in 1912 in Cody, Wyoming, Pollock wasn't your typical artist in the making. He grew up in the rugged American West, surrounded by vast landscapes and open skies. Little did he know, these early experiences would shape his artistic vision in ways he couldn't imagine. As a young man, Pollock was a bit of a rebel. He got kicked out of not one, but 2 high schools. Talk about a troublemaker. But beneath that rough exterior was a creative soul yearning to express itself. In 1930, Pollock packed his bags and headed to the Big Apple. New York City was a far cry from the dusty plains of his childhood. Here he studied under Thomas Hart Benton, a painter known for his scenes of everyday American life. But Pollock had bigger dreams. He wanted to break free from tradition and forge his own path. The 1930s were tough times for everyone, including artists. But Pollock caught a break. He landed a job with the Works Progress Administration's Federal Art Project. For 8 years, he had a steady paycheck and the freedom to experiment. It was during this time that Pollock began to find his voice as an artist. But life wasn't all sunshine and rainbows for our budding painter. Pollock struggled with demons of his own. Alcoholism plagued him throughout his life, threatening to derail his career before it even began. In a desperate bid to conquer his addiction, he turned to an unlikely source: psychoanalysis. From 1938 to 1941, Pollock underwent Jungian therapy. It was a turning point. The experience introduced him to the concept of the unconscious mind and sparked a fascination with symbolism that would fuel his art for years to come. As the 1940s rolled around, Pollock's work began to attract attention. He caught the eye of Peggy Guggenheim, a wealthy art collector with a nose for talent. She gave him his first solo show in 1943. The art world sat up and took notice, but Pollock was just getting started. In 1945, he married fellow artist Lee Krasner and moved to a farmhouse in Springs, Long Island. It was here, in a small barn converted into a studio, that magic would happen. Imagine Pollock in that barn, circling a canvas laid out on the floor. He's not using brushes anymore. Instead, he's dripping, flinging and pouring paint directly onto the surface. It's a dance, a performance, an act of creation unlike anything seen before. This technique, which Pollock perfected in the late 1940s, would come to be known as action painting. It was revolutionary, gone were the careful brushstrokes and planned compositions of traditional art. In their place was pure, unbridled expression. Pollock's paintings from this period are a riot of colour and movement. Take Lavender Mist, created in 1950. At first glance, it might look like a tangle of random lines and splatters. But look closer. There's a rhythm to the chaos, a balance in the seemingly random swirls and drips. Critics were divided. Some hailed Pollock as a genius, a true American original. Others scoffed, dubbing him Jack the Dripper. But love it or hate it, you couldn't ignore it. In 1949, Life magazine posed a provocative question. Is he the greatest living painter in the United States? The article thrust Pollock into the spotlight. Suddenly, he wasn't just an artist, he was a celebrity. But fame came at a price. The pressure to produce, to innovate, to stay on top was intense. Pollock's drinking, which he had managed to control for a time, spiraled out of control once again. By the early 1950s, Pollock was struggling. He abandoned his signature drip style, returning to more recognisable figures and forms. But something had changed. The magic, the spontaneity that had made his earlier work so electrifying, seemed to have faded. On August 11th, 1956, Pollock's life came to a tragic end. Drunk and behind the wheel, he crashed his car near his home in Springs. He was just 44 years old. But Pollock's influence lived on. His work paved the way for the abstract expressionist movement, which dominated American art in the 1950s and beyond. Artists like Willem de Kooning, Mark Rothko, and Franz Klein all owed a debt to Pollock's groundbreaking approach. Today, Pollock's paintings hang in some of the world's most prestigious museums. They command astronomical prices at auction. In 2006, Pollock's number 5 sold for a jaw-dropping $140 million. But perhaps Pollock's greatest legacy is the way he changed how we think about art itself. He showed that art could be about the act of creation as much as the final product. He proved that beauty could be found in chaos, meaning in abstraction. Remember Blue Poles, that painting that nearly brought down a government? In 1973, the National Gallery of Australia bought it for $2 million. It was a scandalous sum at the time, and the purchase sparked a nationwide controversy. But today, Blue Poles is considered priceless, a national treasure. Pollock once said, "The painting has a life of its own. I try to let it come through." And come through it did, in ways that continue to astonish and inspire us today. So the next time you see a Pollock painting, don't just look at it, feel it. Let your eye travel through the intricate web of colour and line. Imagine the artist's movements as he created it, dancing around the canvas in a frenzy of creativity. Because that's what Pollock gave us. Not just paintings, but glimpses into the very act of creation itself. He showed us that art could be wild, uncontrolled, even chaotic, and still be beautiful. Jackson Pollock may have left this world too soon, but his spirit lives on in every splash of paint, every bold artistic gesture. He didn't just change art, he redefined it. And for that, we'll always remember the man they called Jack the Dripper.